Now, West African leaders have called for the swift creation of a unity government in Mali and a fresh vote after disputed elections, but warned of sanctions against those opposing efforts to end the country's crisis. In a statement issued after a video conference on Monday, heads of the 15-nation regional bloc, ECOWAS, stood by Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, but called for a unity government to be established rapidly and urged the opposition to join it. Addressing demands by protesters that Keïta quit, the bloc said the country's democratic constitution had to be respected and asked an ECOWAS commission to consider sanctions against all those who act contrary to the normalization process of the crisis. So ECOWAS called for its plan to be implemented within 10 days. Now, what's been the reaction so far? One thing that is clear for now is that the M5 RFP opposition coalition that has spearheaded anti-Keïta protests are unimpressed by the proposals. We go now to hear more on this as we bring in Said Penda, a journalist and political analyst based in Abidjan. Said, it's good to have you with us this morning before the ECOWAS video conference summit held on Monday, yesterday that is. Ivorian leader Alassane Ouattara said it was the credibility of the sub-regional group that was at stake. First off, tell us, let us talk about this, and I'm talking now about what President Ouattara means by saying the credibility of ECOWAS is at stake.
ECOWAS is an organization that, unlike other organizations in certain sub-regions of Africa, has a great deal of credibility, particularly in the area of crisis management. It began to manage crisis, particularly in Liberia and Sierra Leone, where ECOWAS deplored what was known then as the ECOMOG. It has managed several other crises, most recently in Guinea-Bissau, where it helped to install a regime in place. I'll also quickly cite the case of Gambia, where ECOWAS made it possible to respect the results that came out of the ballot box in the face of a dictator, Yahya Jammeh, who was determined to hold on to power. The credibility of ECOWAS is also at stake in Mali, because if ECOWAS agreed to set a precedent whereby a democratically elected head of state, despite everything else that could be reproached against him, is removed from office by the streets, ECOWAS would lose credibility somewhere.
Interesting, Said. But generally, Said, what can we learn from their last mission? 5 ECOWAS heads of state in Bamako. Many have described their visit a failure. But really, how do you see it? Success or failure for you?
No, I cannot speak of the failure of the mission of the 5 heads of state who went to Bamako. It should be noted that the 5 heads of states were not under any great illusion when they left for Mali. It is not a question of imagining that. Once they arrived in Mali, the opposition was done at attention and accede to all the ECOWAS resolutions. What we can note, however, is that the heads of state, after meeting with the parties and the final communique states this very clearly, made the observation that there's only the June 5th group, that is to say, the radical opposition, and the final communique of the heads of states indicates that all the other parties, particularly civil society organizations, had acceded to the ECOWAS resolutions relating in particular to the formation of the government of national unity. It was therefore not a failure that one of the parties had rejected the ECOWAS proposals.
Said, in a post on social networks, you did write that it is President IBK, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, who comes out strengthened after the intervention of his 5 counterparts. Can you shed more light on this?
On reading the facts, we can estimate that it is President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta who comes out strengthened at the end of the mission to Bamako of the 5 heads of state. Why is that? Because the heads of state were very clear. The red line that should not be crossed is the overthrow of the regime by a few. They confirmed President IBK as the democratically elected president of the republic with full presidential prerogatives. That is a strong point. because the opposition was prepared to accept that President IBK would remain in office until the end of his term, on the sole condition that the opposition could be given the opportunity to appoint the Prime Minister and that he would have full executive powers. In other words, the idea was to strip the President of all his constitutional powers, which should be handed over to the Prime Minister appointed by the opposition.
I see. So the five heads of state have so far been intractable on the demand of the resignation of President Boubacar Keïta by the M5 opposition. Some have argued, in fact, that this is a way to protect their rear guard and not open the Pandora's box for such a move in their own countries. What do you make of this?
I think that the issue of fear of opening a Pandora's box by accessing things that would be unconstitutional in Bamako should not be reported undoubtedly to the five heads of state or even to all heads of states of ECOWAS. It is a question of principles of law. In a democracy, as we know very well, a regime is changed through the ballot box and not on the streets. We cannot accept as Africans to deal with a kind of democracy on the cheap. Everything that happens elsewhere in all democratic systems must be applicable to Africa. We Africans must also arrive. We Africans are situations where you accept a form of democratic rigor. I too would have immense things to reproach the IBK regime for. But the reality is that the regime must be changed democratically.
Well said, Said. Well said. Thank you very much. I'd love to thank you for your insight and time with us this morning. Thank you. Said Penda, journalist and political analyst based in Abidjan. If you are just joining us, you're watching The Morning Call right here with me, Jerry Fitaya Bambi on Africa News. We have other stories making the headlines across the continent. Up next.